Um, Today, it's about learning how to ace that job interview. And we centered this webinar around three themes, right? Background, subject matter, and then a bit of product sense towards the end there. And then we're going to jump in with our speakers. As Paul already pointed out, we have three amazing speakers: Marcos from Pinterest, we have Kalia from Creative People, and Roshni from IBM. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Let's start with Kalia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kalia, and I am the design research agent here at Creative People. I talk to UX researchers all day, every day. I'm getting to know the space and everyone in it pretty well, and I'm excited to be here today.
All right. Here from Marcos.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcos. I'm a research lead at Pinterest, but currently the interim manager for create researchers at Pinterest.
Last but not least.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Roshni. So happy to be here. I'm currently an intern at IBM working as a design researcher for artificial intelligence applications, rebranded as IBM Sustainability Software. And I'm also a master's student at the University of Toronto. Not too long ago, I was in your shoes trying to ace my first job interview. And I think going through the process, it's very fresh in my mind. I'm happy to share those insights. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and she aced it. So, right, she's here. And that's fresh knowledge, right? You can tell the amount of subject we're trying to cover and also our speakers kind of have the background to kind of dive in and make sure we can walk away with something substantial. So let's set the scene. Annalise is here. Annalise is playing today our interviewee. This webinar is special in a way. We figure instead of just asking questions to all of these speakers and them trying to tell us what about acing a job interview, we do a few skits for you. And from there, questions will rise and we can get in deeper. So myself, I'm playing a hiring manager from a mid-range fintech startup. And the candidate is Annalise. Annalise, we've been kind of looking at, in this scenario, we've been looking at different resumes, looking through different people, and she seems to fit, right? She seems to fit what we want. But then we got her in an interview and we're going to ask some questions. So, Annalise, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Let's pay attention, everyone. Let's go through the first one. Well, nice to meet you, Annalise. Thank you for being in this last round interview with us. We had a great time learning about you through our recruiter and also reading your resume. Our first question today is, tell us a little bit about your background and why you are a good fit for the role.
Okay. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself, I guess. A little bit about my background. Well, I have a background in business analysis and market research with a business degree from UCLA. Before this, I worked previously for a smaller fintech company that actually called themselves Big Fintech Company as a junior UX researcher. And there what did I do? Well, I assisted the other UX researchers with large and small projects, including both qualitative and quantitative studies. And I realized that I have an aptitude for quantitative research, but don't get me wrong, I love interacting with people. I also, based on my marketing research background, I was able to, through UX research, identify, track, and share trends and findings. But instead of trends, it was patterns. My role supported data-driven product development that prioritized user insights and combated assumptions. And to tell you a little bit about my interest in UX, I really want to combine my passion for financial services and fintech with building value for businesses while making an impact on users' lives in a tangible way. My goals, I want to grow and develop my skills as a UX researcher, allow my multifaceted understanding of product and business developments to add strength to my team. So I feel like, after looking at, like, I'm going to take a quick look again at the job description. From what I remember, yeah, these are some things that you wanted to know, right? Like whether or not I know qualitative, quantitative. I haven't assisted with UX workshops like you're asking, but I can learn.
Wow.
Did that answer your question?
It did. So action, right? So we up there. We had a great conversation. So as you can tell, I think someone needs to pause their mic. Maybe it is you, Annalise. Needs to kind of mute the mic. Okay. As you can tell, there were a lot of things that happened through that conversation. I asked her a little about her background and the fit for the role, and we went on a roller coaster. There are some good things that happen and some bad ones. But before I jump in, let's direct this question let's start with Roshni, right? How does a researcher, a young researcher, a junior researcher, or even someone crossing into the field answer this question adequately?
So there was a lot of moments when you were speaking, Annalise, where I was thinking back to a lot of my job interviews where I have been in your shoes and said things when it came to that. And all that came to mind is be prepared. Like, have your cheat sheet ahead of time that you know exactly what you want to say. If you've heard of the STAR methodology, you could look it up. But it's really like knowing exactly how you can know. I don't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but it just kind of came up while you were speaking. But it's a method to really show your impact, where you were a STAR. STAR or SMART. There you go. Situation, task, actions, result. Thank you so much for that. It's basically looking at a situation, giving an example, looking at that task that you were doing, what was the action, and then what was the actual result that came out of that. Instead of the ums and the maybes, going back to the job description, I wouldn't recommend doing that on a job interview, but really know how, if you can go through the job description, I really like that you brought that up, put STAR next to each of the attributes that are listed there, and know exactly what you're going to that interview to say, and you have those like kind of at the top of your head ready to give into that conversation. I always recommend doing prep rounds of interviews with a trusted friend or colleague, just so that you can get a feel for the lingo that you're going to use, have someone coming back at you with questions and a back and forth Q&A. But yeah, that's what really came to mind there, really being prepared and having your cheat sheet ready to go.
Very good. Things to do and things not to do. Marcos, you've been in this situation a lot, interviewing people, I'm sure, and people of all levels. Tell us a few things with this question that makes impact on you as a hiring manager, right? Background and fit. What are some things that really hit home for you?
Similarly, I like someone who's done their homework. I get Annalise, like, you deserve an Oscar, because I was having like I was like, oh my God, this girl needs to get it together. I was sorry. I was just like, wait, is she like improvising the rest? What's happening here? And then I clued in and I was like, oh my God, okay, now I understand. So I would say like this, it was funny, like I think people talked about like situation, task, action, result, but also relate, particularly for folks who are new to the field or trying to break in the field. Like if you're at the job interview, that means you've at least piqued someone's curiosity. Mm-hmm. And so if you've never worked in UX before, show me that you understand what UX is by relating how your past experience brought you here and why you think you would be good for the role, right? Like I just hired someone fresh out of graduate school, not a lick of usability testing on her CV, but she was able to show me that she was like had very thoughtfully understood what user experience is and how she could rely on her academic experience to do the role. And like when we even tossed her some hardball questions around like speed of research and methodology in applied product research as opposed to academia, and she was like, oh, and here's how I would take the study I did as part of my graduate work and like translate it into like a 2-month project. And so that to me shows that like she gets it. She understands like how, like what she's bringing to the table, and she's done her homework enough to show me that she understands this field. And will obviously need some coaching and will need to learn a few things, but knows enough to tell me like I've done my homework, I'm prepared for the assignment. I think that is like the biggest differentiator I see when interviewing people of any level, is like people who show up prepared. They know the company, they know UX, they know like they have a good understanding of what the role is.
There are some things to kind of point out there. One, the STAR method came out twice, so that's something to hold, right? Like, go get that, put it on the sheet, have it in front of you, and train yourself through answering questions through that. The second thing Marcus mentioned here, he made an emphasis to know the company. You as a researcher, this is your first role, essentially. You got into the interview, you need to go dig some things up on a company. What are they working on now? What's in the news, right? What's on LinkedIn? Stalk the people that you're going to be interviewing with, their interests, what they talk about. So you can build a closer connection. Get into the interview, you pick someone's interest, they're spending company budget and time interviewing you. That means they're already being invested. Close the deal, right? So let's go to Kalia. Kalia, you see a lot of portfolios, resume. You have a lot of first-time conversations, I bet, as well. So tell us a bit about what those first-time conversations are like. And when you ask this question about background, because you probably see it a little before the candidate, right? You see it on the LinkedIn, you see it a bunch of places. Tell us a bit about how you take the background to that first conversation with them.
Yes, I definitely want to hear all about your background, but I also want to hear about the things that I can't, or that the client can't read on LinkedIn. My job is to help you understand how to truly sell yourself. And your LinkedIn may have gotten you there, but like you said, you want to close that deal, right? So you want to like seal a deal for them. You have to be able to help me help you really get them to see a picture of who you are and the work that you can do. LinkedIn can only take you but so far. It can get you an initial conversation, but the work that you put in, you being able to identify your metrics and methods, that's what's going to push you further along in the process.
Very good. Very good. So let's go back to Annalise with a quick question. So with the feedback that we've heard, if you were to do that again, what are some things that stood out to you?
I would say, well, preparation is key. Preparation and knowing my story, knowing that this is not the time to maybe repeat from my resume or my LinkedIn. This is a time to really highlight why I would be a good fit for the role. So interweaving my past experience, finding a way to make it mesh, finding a way to kind of connect the dots with my past experience with this current role and why I would be great for this role. Absolutely.
I came to those conclusions as well. And just to let everyone know, these tests or these kits are being done also on purpose, right? We're showing some good things and also some bad things so we can discuss, right? So let's pick up the good habits. Let's go to our second skit. I'm still a hiring manager from a mid-range fintech company. And Annalise is still an interviewee that we found interesting enough to bring into this interview, this qualitative interview, this behavioral interview as well. Let's jump in. So Annalise, thank you for telling us about your background. We thought that was interesting, and we at this point in the conversation, we like to jump to a little more of a technical question. So here's a scenario for you. Let's say you're talking to an executive about research. They don't know anything about UX research, and they are curious about the difference between A/B testing and usability testing. How would you go about explaining that and answering the question to this executive?
I think you bring up an important point that the person I'm speaking to, the executive, has very limited or no knowledge at all of UX research. So that's really going to help me determine what I'm going to say and how I say it. My most important goal when I speak, especially to executives or stakeholders or leadership that don't know a lot about UX research, is to keep what I share clear, succinct, and human. Not too much design speak, try to make it memorable, maybe use some analogies or illustrations, and try to apply it to the current project or product if possible. That said, to answer their question about the difference between A/B testing and usability testing, I briefly explained probably that, first of all, these are methods that we use as researchers to ensure the plan for a product's functions, features, and overall purpose, to making sure that that's all in line with what users actually want by observing how real-life people use a product. If I were to put it really plainly, with likely if the executive has very limited time, I would say that A/B tests are used to carried out to measure users' preference, whereas usability tests are carried out to measure users' behavior. And then I could definitely elaborate from there, but at least to have a baseline understanding of the human difference between both of them.
Wow, awesome. I really like how the first, and that's cut. I really like how you brought the answer around. These are methods we use in research, right? Kind of our tools. Let's start with Marcos with this question. When it comes to these technical types of questions in interviews, whether you're driving the user to kind of dig in a bit about their technical prowess and if they are really knowledgeable UX researchers. As an interviewer, how do you, first, what are some kind of questions you ask around? I mean, our question was just an example. And also, what are you looking to hear to kind of measure, this interviewee?
Sure. So we tend to do what's called a first project case study. So we have our candidates sort of present what would your first project be at Pinterest, and we use that to understand, like, do they have methodological competence, and like, can they design a sort of end-to-end study, and what does that look like? So I mean, so inevitably they have to present, like, they have to tell us like what method they would use and why, and then we might say like, oh, like, okay, if how would you do this if this was a survey? And so like there, it's really just trying to understand like where like someone's like chosen methods, and then also like if you couldn't do your favorite, like what else would you do, and really just have them explain their choices around like why this method as opposed to other methods, really just to get a sense of conversation. And I think it's okay as well if someone is like, oh, like I've never run a diary study before, but I have done unmoderated testing, so I could see like why a sort of longer like diary study might be better than just some unmoderated usability. And I think it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable around, like, if you don't, like, if someone's like, why not this method? If you say like, I haven't had a lot of experience with it, so I prefer to use something that I'm super comfortable with for my first project. We've had situations like that. And so it's really just that it's for us to understand, like, what methods are you bringing to the table like today, and what methods might you need to work with someone on the team with.
Very nice. So two things here. Once I heard situation, a lot of companies will put you in a situational kind of give you situational questions, and you need to be ready for that. How do you practice for situational questions? We'll get to that as well. And then the second thing I heard is it's okay to be honest. Hey, I haven't done this before. I'm really good at this. I haven't done this before. one of the key essential core of a UX researcher is to learn. We're curious, knowledgeable. So everyone knows you can learn something new. You're not Superman. You're not supposed to know every single method. I mean, there are PhD studies on just surveys. So no, you're not the best survey in the world. We understand that. So be honest in your answer. Let's go to Kalia with this. How do you as a recruiter determine a candidate's technical prowess? How do you make that out from talking to them and so forth, and looking at their resume?
It starts from my initial call with them. I really ask them to walk me through their employment history. Tell me about what you did when you were at every job. I want to know what methods you use. Do you lean more quant or qual? Tell me what your outcomes were from that. I need to get an understanding of like what your high points are and what your low points are. Just like we, as you guys as you as a researcher is like look for pleasure points and pain points. Like I need to know your pleasure points and pain points. That way I'm able to say, okay, these are the right opportunities for you because you lean more quant and this deals with more data-driven research than you having to go out there and talk to people. This is your strong suit. Now, if you're someone who's mixed method and it's not something that you like hold true to you, it's a little bit easier for me to go, okay, so tell me how you had one impact the other. And then when you did both of these methodologies, what was the outcome? That way I can really, lay out to the client, like this person has utilized these skill sets and this is how this can directly impact your business. But it's also up to you as the candidate, the interviewee, to make sure that you get that across to the hiring manager or whoever is interviewing you.
So what you've done in the past matters, and how you tell the story to convey what kind of researcher you are is what I'm here also matters, right? If you're going to lean quant, you're a qualitative person, you're a mixed method, you need to be able to get that across to essentially the gatekeeper. If you cannot get past her, you can't get to the job. And let's be honest about that, right? You have to get past Kalia to get to the job, to get to the next conversation. And that really holds on explaining what you've done. Roshni, let's go to you and talk a bit about how, this question, especially in the field that you work in, and this is coming up more and more people are going to be working in AI and machine learning and this future-facing technology. How do you answer this question, right? And knowing that you're interviewing for a job in a field like this?
Yeah, for sure. I will say, go back down to the basics, whether it's AI, whether it's machine learning, whether it's sustainability software, which is what we are right now. What I've learned is that before I had a lot of imposter syndrome going into the artificial intelligence department, thinking I don't know the lingo, I don't know this and that, but there was always a can-do attitude to know that I could learn it. And when I got there, I realized that it's just a big fancy buzzword and a big name. It's really easy to understand, at least from where you are in your role in your career. I think also knowing that it's okay to not know everything, because you're never going to know everything, right? You've got people in different roles and different places in their career, so that you can learn, and coming with that attitude again, that knowing you're open to learning, to understanding the jargon or the lingo that's used in the company, that's really motivating. That's what I've heard from different hiring managers. And when I got to IBM, I remember asking my boss, I'm like, why did you hire me? He was just saying to me, I really like that you admitted that you didn't know something, but you didn't see that as a fault. You just saw that as an opportunity to grow your mind. Having a growth mindset, I think, really helps you in this field, because you're always learning. And as a UX researcher, you're never going to really know your product space or the domain you're working in. You just need to know that how you learn best and how you can apply those learning techniques to be as efficient as you can on the job, whatever the job may be. And I'll echo what the other speakers have said about knowing your story and knowing what your strengths are, but also knowing the weaknesses you have and bringing those to the table and saying, this is where I'm lacking, but this is the steps I'm doing to complement those lacking. So I'm thinking back to another interview. It wasn't for IBM, but it was another last year, and it was a hard decision to come across both of them. And I remember I didn't know InVision at the time, but they wanted the UX researcher to understand InVision and how to make the prototypes and also share those prototypes out and provide feedback on the prototypes, do usability tests through the prototypes. I did a quick LinkedIn Learning course, I think the week of the interview, and I said, hey, I didn't know anything about this last week, but I'm trying. And this is what I'm really trying to do to build up my skill set. And I really value your organization. And I saw through my research of your company and through what the recruiter said to me is that this tool is really important to learn. I can promise you I'm not an expert after a couple-hour LinkedIn Learning course, but I'm getting there. Yeah.
It comes up again, right? Being honest with the skills that you do have, because they will make a difference. There's something in UX research that I've noticed is the teams that I've worked with rely a lot on trust, because we have to learn quickly. And really, if a researcher is not trustworthy, then their research and their insight might not be either. So kind of getting that across in your interviews, it's key, right? It's really key. And I was going to ask this: are we using the same methods in other fields that we are, as you using AI right now? Are we still doing A/B testing and qualitative research? And so there you go, right? No matter the field, there are some fundamental things that you need to know as well. So let's go back to Annalise and ask that, kind of talk through after what we heard. How would you have answered that question any better? What are some things that you took away from there?
Well, as in the case of the first question, I think relating what I'm talking about specifically to the role, to the company, and highlighting any possible skills that I can, anything that can bring maybe some more value. I feel like that might have maybe shifted some of what I said. I might have explained a little bit more. Oh, good, my sound is better. Okay. I might have explained a little bit more about the process, but still keep it nice and tight, the story. Yeah, just keep it like just as succinct and like clear as possible. I'd still go that route every time.
Clear and as succinct as possible. I think we're in a rodeo. We can see themes in a question that really relies on preparation. Even what we're doing right now is essential, right? Having someone to do a mock interview with and answer these questions multiple times, feeling really comfortable moving through our questions are really going to help. Let's move into a little bit of product sense, cross-team relationship building. This third skill really touches upon a few things. And it's essential that as UX researchers, we know that we work in a field that is driven by product technology and product sense, which is understanding timelines, how product moves from ideations through engineering all the way out. It's key. So, Annalise, are you ready?
Yes.
So I'm still the hiring manager, again, at a mid-range fintech company, and Annalise is still someone we're interviewing. Here's a question. How do you guide stakeholders to make sound research-informed decision about their product or services? And a bit more on that, to elaborate on the question is, what if the business goals and the user needs are misaligned? What do you do? How do you get that across to your stakeholders? And, what will make them, what you can't make them listen to you, but what can convince them to kind of look into the research and take it into consideration?
Well, I can actually think of one example of a time when just this type of scenario came up. A couple of years ago, one of my earlier experiences as a researcher, I was working with both stakeholders and other cross-functional partners to determine goals for an e-commerce site. we were trying to determine research needs, what type of research was needed. And in some cases, they wondered whether or not research was needed at all. So they also had a million ideas and no one was 100% aligned. So to mitigate this, my team and I actually led like a knowledge session using, Miro. We got everyone in the same space at the same time. It was like a 2-hour session, but we were able to get everyone on the same page. Everything everyone knew about the project, about the users, getting, like I said, getting everyone on the same page. That was really crucial. We also led other sessions, we had a roadmap walkthrough. We also presented parts of our research repository to help them understand and identify which research was visible and necessary for them to have access to, just so that there was, like I said, high visibility, lots of transparency in the process, so they could understand why we needed to align our business needs with our users' needs. At the end of the day, we were able to they were able to understand more clearly the need for research-informed decisions and clearer constraints. And then they also had something to reference at the end of the day, our different sessions, the repository. And this really just resulted in more clarity for the team and the stakeholders. And the process went a lot more smoothly from there. And it's something we continue to implement.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. So cut there and let's jump into, there are a lot of things that were brought up in that answer. And I'm glad that was a really great answer, in my opinion. But Marcos, when it comes to stakeholder relationships as a UX researcher and taking research on the road, as we say, taking insights on the road, what is that like? What does a UX researcher needs to be ready for? And how do you tell that story even?
It is half my job. Stakeholder relationships is half my job. I spend more time in meetings trying to understand what the hell a PM wants than I do anything else, and giving them a point of view with my subject matter expertise. So I think something that we interview very heavily on is people's experience on collaboration and working in teams, particularly working like what we call cross-functionally. So, what experience do you have working with people who aren't other researchers, who do very different jobs than you? And how do you communicate effectively with these people? I think as well, a big part of what we're looking at when we're interviewing someone is their ability to storytell, because you are expected to really roadshow your insights and share them out. Something I'm increasingly looking at is someone creative in the way they're able to deliver insights beyond the kind of typical slide deck report. Are there, have they experimented with doing sizzle reels? Have they experimented with other kinds of presentation styles, and what's worked and even what's not worked, but just show me that you have the ability to storytell, that you are comfortable presenting, and it doesn't need to be massive audiences, right? Your stakeholder team might be a handful of people. It might be the PM and the designer, and if you're lucky, an eng or two. But show me that you can craft a cohesive narrative. In comedy, they talk about it as the tight 10. And so if you're able to craft your own tight 10, I feel that goes a long way into showing me that you are able to tell me a story with a beginning, middle, end, and able to sort of craft narrative.
You brought up a great example of comedy. Are there some other resources, techniques that you can share about storytelling, especially in user experience research? Some things that helped you, anything, resources and so forth.
I read a lot of ethnography. I'm an anthropologist by training. I read a lot of ethnography. Ethnographers, like, oh my God, a lot of what we do is spin a yarn and call it theory. So I, as well, I did a course at the Center for Digital Storytelling in Berkeley. There's lots of different, story, like visual storytelling or storytelling for beginners, opportunities. I listen to really bougie, chuggy podcasts like The Moth and This American Life that, like, they're all about storytelling. And so I learned to storytell by listening to storytellers.
Well, I listen to a lot of books, and I think that's a great one. Listening to other storytellers probably can move you paces in crafting your own, because we copy and we also improve on craft. Roshni, how about you? With a question like this, and I would love to hear from the perspective of coming into maybe coming to a company, not being very seasoned there. What is it like to build stakeholder relationships and also take insight to go, hey, we are in a, this, we're looking at this, but this is what I found. While being new there, what does that play like? Well, with in that relationship.
Yeah, so many ideas coming to mind. Thanks for that question. Storytelling is definitely one that definitely is like how you kind of make your mark getting in through the door. But also, when I think my tech is having, sorry. Also, when I first started at IBM, I still remember my first project. I just remember learning in school that you need to know your stakeholders, you need to sell to your stakeholders, you need to get your stakeholders buy-in. So I just set up coffee chats with everyone on the team. And honestly, it helped me out so much to just build up that rapport, to come in as, hey, I'm new. I just want to get to know you. Can you tell me a little bit about your job? And can we just connect? And I set up about half an hour of those coffee chats with my product managers, with my designers, content designers, my engineers, everyone who I was working with cross-functionally. When I did that within the couple first weeks of getting onboarded to the project, 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, those relationships were already established. So I'd already earned their trust by sharing my story with them, sharing why I got into UX, hearing from them why they are in their field and what they care about. And I also got to know my audience. That's something I've heard a lot throughout my entire UX career in the last couple of 2 years or so. All I keep hearing from managers saying, know your audience, know who you're selling to, know exactly what they need. So when I got to have those conversations, I didn't know this at the time, but I was really learning about what motivates them, what their insights are like, and what they really want to hear from me from the field. I think that unconsciously led to crafting my insights to know my audience's needs and know exactly how I can prioritize based on their requirements. Another tidbit I got from one of my first design coaches is Satara Singh. She helped me understand UX research postcards. So I did a quick Google search to find something similar to what I use at IBM, but essentially it's like a quick snippet from the field that you can give internally out to your stakeholders so that there's no surprises at the end, and they can raise any like issues or concerns or questions intermittently, so that if you have these maybe every 2 weeks, every 1 week kind of update about what you're doing right now in UX research, what updates are coming out from your field work, just a very quick summary highlight of the work you're doing and what you're finding and how this is going to impact the product in the long term, just based on like this user's not going to be able to use this button because we've learned that this is the way this method has showcased that. I can't give you concrete examples without breaking my NDA, but I just want to tell you that know to share as much as you can. Always communicate. Like UX research is like being in a relationship with a bunch of people. If you don't communicate at the end, something's going to blow up. So just keep communicating as much as you can and intermittently.
I really like that. Thank you for the depth. And one thing I took away from that, which is essential for a lot of people going into the field, interviewing and even starting their careers, is meeting people without any true purpose. The purpose is just to get to know the people you work with. This is going to be so essential throughout your tenure at the company. How people operate, who knows what, and when you bring research back, how to collaborate with them, especially. So those things, that very small piece of advice there goes a very long way, especially when you're moving into the field. So, Kalia, for you, what are some of those things you hear from hiring managers or people that you talk to about the role, and when they're telling you about this is the kind of person we're looking for? I'd love to hear some of those characteristics that come up for UX researchers, especially.
I think just to like really support everything the other speakers have said, communication is key. They're looking for someone who's a good, strong communicator. You know, we here at Creative People like to live by facts, stats, and figures. So, and as a UX researcher, you need to make sure that your facts, stats, and figures do just that. Sell to the stakeholders exactly what the research has been doing and how it's been impacting the business. So someone who's able to communicate, someone who is going to be punchy and efficient with communicating with them, because, you know, the truth of the matter is you never know how much time you're going to have. And also someone who, you know, is very much keen on making sure that research is showcased in such a light that is easily understandable or digestible, as well as, you know, getting across the kind of methodologies and things that you use.
We're good. We come to the end of our play, our plays here, but one thing you can take away from the first 3 skits we did is practice is key. Being transparent in your skill set, in your background, and connecting to that is key. And definitely learning how to communicate by getting to know your stakeholders and the people you're working with is also going to go very much forward. Another thing I'll take is practice these. These are just 3 scenarios around 3 things: background, technical skills, and stakeholder relationships, and also product sense. Practice these things, practice these questions with each other, whoever you can find, to kind of get feedback and get comfortable, right, in those. Let's go to our 4th question here. This is an interesting one, and it goes directly to our speakers today. What is a great question you were asked during an interview? So usually at the end of UX researcher interviews, any interview, the manager or the hiring person is usually going to say, hey, do you have any questions for us? And so forth, any comments. This is the part where you've been talking so much and answering questions, you're a little tired sometimes, you don't know what to ask, maybe you didn't think it went as well as you thought. So let's start with Roshni, right? What are some great questions that you need to have in mind when it comes to that?
Yeah, I'm gonna plagiarize a little bit from one of my mentors, Joshua Fan, who's been a really great mentor to me in my career development journey so far. And he said, research your company, then ask something based on the company you've researched. So if it's for, say, a certain sector, whether it's AI, whether it's finance, whether it's clothing, something in that lines, understand the environment, the economy around it, and then go to your interviewer and say, hey, like, I did some research on the trends of this industry. Where do you see UX research fitting in this? And how do you see the projection of this growth in the company in the next 5 years, 2 years, 3 years? That really shows that you know the industry inside and out, and you've done your homework to know exactly where the industry is headed. You're curious to learn, like, from the organization where you fit into that and how you can add value, which is my next question. Really asking, how can I add value from day one? That's something that I really like to ask folks, because I think when you go to an organization, you're there for the people and you're there for the impact and you're there for the actual value you're adding to the organization. So those are my 2.
Let's go to Kalia for this.
I love this question. So the advice I give, you can break it up into two ways. So personal and towards the client or who you're interviewing with. But leave no stone unturned. So you want to make sure that you ask questions that are honest. And it's not so about what you question, but how you question it. So like if you're interviewing at a startup and you're scared, you can ask about the runway. That's something that most people like tread lightly around, but if you deliver it correctly, that's something that you're going to want to know. It's a great question to ask as well, and it shows just how invested you are in that company. And another question you can ask, and I think that a lot of hiring managers will look at you and be like, wow, this person really is like on it, is how, or like, do you have any hesitations on my candidacy? And is there anything that you think I'm missing, or is there anything I can highlight so I can show to you that I can add to this company?
Let's pause there and kind of explain to whoever's on the call, if you don't already know, what a runway is when you're interviewing at a startup.
Sure. So a runway is dealing with funding. Runway, think of it about like how long or what is the stretch of a company. So that's usually something that you want to ask, especially if you're someone who's like, this is my first time going into a startup, depending on the startup size as well. For some people, just a little bit more background, startups go from like Series A, which is a little bit smaller, all the way up to Series E, that is like pre-IPO or IPO companies.
Yeah. So you know, IBM and Pinterest don't have that issue, but our younger startups have runway issues, right? We just dealt with something like this week as well. So kind of understanding the lingo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. A conversation to really dig in with your recruiter. Ask a lot about the company, where they are in their funding, what's projected, all of that, right? And it's all projections, it's not exact science. Marcos, let's talk to you about this. What are some great questions you've heard, you know, people ask you at the end of interviews, and what are you looking for? Are you looking for anything in particular when this person is asking this question? Are you still evaluating at that point?
In the current job market, no. At this point, I'm usually trying to sell, right? Because we're hiring a bunch of senior roles. Like, good luck finding senior UXRs in this job market. So when I am evaluating, I really like, what are the 30, 60, 90? What's the 30, 60, 90 expectations of this role? Like, so what does success look like in the first 30 days, in the first 60 days, and in the first 90 days? And that tells me like this person wants to understand like what it takes to, you know, like, and also like, I feel a little like, oh God, do I know what the 30, 60, 90s are? Like, I appreciate a question that makes me question if I showed up prepared to the job interview, right? So like any question around like evaluation criteria, I'm such a big like culture person that I always hope that they ask a question around like vibe, you know, and a question that I asked that I was told was good, although I think it's pretty basic, was around like, what is this role solving or unlocking? Like, what are, you know, if like you find, like, let's just say the perfect candidate exists, what would this perfect candidate unlock for the rest of the team? Yeah, I usually phrase it around like, here's a Harry Potter wand, wave it, and like, what's one thing this person could take off your plate that would make your life a lot easier? That's how I ask that question. Oh,
that's so vibe and culture. That's because you need to work there for a long period of time. Expectations is the other thing I really heard here is, you know, what is a culture like and what are those expectations? Let's bounce this question again to Kali and talk about like culture. How do you, as a recruiter, you know, and specifically for US researchers, which is fantastic that we even found you and have you here. Thank you for coming. How do you translate culture, right, from a company that you have requisitions from to a potential employee, or potential staff member?
Of course, I'm happy to be here, number one. And number two, here, we really take the time to vet our clients. We talk to them, we sometimes meet them in person as much as we can, but also, COVID has been a thing. But really take the time to get to know not only the hiring manager, but the team. We do our research. We are researchers as well, or at least I am, but my whole team, we work really hard about when it comes to figuring out who is on that team, what that team dynamic looks like. And the leaders here that we work with are true representations of the culture of the client or of that company. And then another thing that I would love to highlight is that we talk about career drivers. And that's something that a lot of people, have probably never been asked before. But what are your career drivers? Because we take that information and then we make sure that we relate it to the company. Like if you don't align with the company, well, that's not a great opportunity for you. And that means we're presenting the wrong opportunity to you. And that means that you won't be a culture fit. So we try to make sure we really lay the groundwork in doing the research and really getting to know you as well as the company, so that we are able to make sure that the client and the candidate are going to mesh well together and be able to have an opportunity of growth.
All right. So even as a company, and I'm sure a lot of companies do this too, you're evaluating the client as well, right? You're talking to the client about the kind of people that are in the market now, whether they're really, and also what they're looking for. Let's jump into some questions from everyone. There's already a Q&A jumping in there. I know there's questions and the team is working really hard. Here are some questions that I have in front of me here that are interesting. Can hands-on experience, this would be for Marcos as well. Can hands-on experience in UXR as a product designer substitute for the lack of master PhD in behavioral science?
I have some more questions, like what's the role? If the role is a quant role, no. Right? No. Yeah, there needs to be more context to that question. I think this is, I'm going to separate a couple things out from this question. The first is a master's and PhD, that's not necessarily a selling feature. In fact, most of the time, MA and PhD, you're finding ways to excuse it or translate it. So I noticed a few questions in the Q&A, how can I only have an undergrad, how can I stand out against people with a PhD? I was like, babe, that is not who you are competing against at all. It's more about finding how can you translate your skills regardless of how many letters are behind your name. I think most of the folks on my team don't have a master's or a PhD. I'll start there. So I see this a lot with product designers, applications who are now trying to transition to UX. They're not clear as to what they're trying to do. So I get something and I'm like, did they apply to the wrong thing? Because they haven't customized or tailored their application in such a way to signal to me that they're looking to pivot. And as a designer, they could bring all this incredible design thinking and design background into a UXR role. But I find that more often than not, designers who are trying to make that pivot don't do a good job of signaling to me that they have put thought into how UX design and UX research are different, and how they would leverage their experience as a designer in a UXR role.
Yeah. Do some homework, but also spend some time with some of your UX design, UX research friends. That's probably the best way to get a bunch of knowledge.
100%.
Find someone on LinkedIn. I mean, it's open network right now. We don't know what it's going to be in 20 years, but right now it's very easy to reach someone and say, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time, 15 minutes, ask a bunch of questions. Here's another interesting question. This one will go to Roshni. What are some good strategies to learn about the company and product before the interview, other than just Googling? There's only so much you can find online.
Oh, that's interesting. Google's my best friend for that, to be honest. I saw something up in the chat earlier about researching the researcher. So I think be really strategic about what you're Googling, not just like the company's name. Are you searching up the company in the region you're going to be working in? Are you searching up the manager you're going to be reporting to? Are you looking at the LinkedIn of the manager you're going to be working with? What methods are they using? What lingo? Where have they worked before? Really know exactly who your team is going to be. Another thing I've done is done coffee chats, like informational interviews with people at the company that I may want to work at one day to understand, like, what's the culture like? Would I be a fit here? What are the hours like? How do they really understand methodology? Do they have a research playbook, or are they a newer startup where they're building a research repository? These are kind of questions that you can ask ahead of time, maybe to a person who works at that organization. Also just reading as much as I can about the industry that I want to apply to. So research never ends. Just do as much secondary research as you can on that organization.
Yeah, be strategic in your research is really what I heard there. Not just the organization, but location, people, subject matter. A lot of researchers are being hired now these days are being hired for specific product teams, and there's a subject at hand. And as you heard Marcos mention earlier, he's now selling people because there's not a lot of senior UX researchers. And Research Bookmark is doing everything to mentor as many as possible. We're coming and we're going to bring a lot more. So no worries there. So Kalia, there's a question here that deals with technical research. How would you explain technical research skills in your background if you come from a non-technical background per se? And this would be interesting because you see people at such an early stage, and if they don't have a background of a UX researcher, which is honestly, I mean, if someone said they've been UX researcher for 20 years, I'm questioning that. You were doing research, you were not a UX researcher. You were doing research for sure, but that title itself is pretty recent. How are you kind of picking up even people that don't have that background into your senior pool of the people, of the client, what the clients are looking for essentially?
That's a great question. I really think it just depends on the kind of method you are using, and making sure, like one of my co-panelists has says, like you relate it back to what they're asking of your capabilities and you being able to do. There are a lot of people who come from an academia background and they have expressed the troubles of like transferring over into like a UX segment of research. And I think that, it really depends on like how you are showcasing your skills. And if you don't have the technical background, I would say try to get into some case studies, start your own case studies. A really great tip I give for some of my more junior candidates is, you created a website where you have your portfolio. Now do a case study on it. How can it be better? What are people saying about the usability of your website? Is it easy to go through and click on and use that to build your skills and go from there?
Very nice. So coming from a non-research background doesn't really put any roadblocks in your way. You're making that roadblock yourself. And this is usually because traditionally, if you don't have a background in a certain field, it's really hard to get in. In UX and UX research, we really see it's almost more attractive for the persons who have a different background when it coming to interview, because they're bringing other knowledge that we're looking for. So kind of beware of that, right? Like it's actually a plus, not a detriment to you. I saw a question pop up right on my screen here that this will be the last question we discuss, but it is important. On salaries. How do you deal with this, right? As a recruiter, and then we're going to go through everybody else. How should we talk about them? How should we ask about them? Let's go from there. Let's start from you, Kalia.
Pay transparency is a thing. But I think what everybody also needs to know is that, and a great example of this is like when you are, let's say, at a startup and you sometimes like you're leveled out as like a principal or a staff, and then you like go into a FANG company and they're like, you'll go back down to a UX researcher. It really depends on the company you're leveling and even the cost of living of where you're at. There are some companies where they have it across the board of an equal pay, and that's great. But there's some places where, you know, it's a lot more to live there, like New York, LA, you know, and so you want to make sure that you are paid according to your cost of living. I think that if you go, like I said earlier, it's all about how you say things and how you go about them. If you ask in a way where you just be as honest and transparent as possible, and you say, you know, hey, well, what do your salary bands look like for this opportunity and role? You know, and they will tell you, you know, some people will tell you exactly what it is, and some people they will say it has a lot of variables that go into it. It really depends. But you know, always also like key tip, know what you would not go below, because then that will help you understand what opportunities that you're going to spend time on and what opportunities are not worth your time.
Okay. Wow. There's a lot there. Again, doing your homework and understanding the landscape, the salary reports that are coming out. And since it is a bit of a gray area because you don't know what you're walking into, be conscious of how to ask that question is what I got from there as well. Marcos, how about
Absolutely.
Kalia, I love the way you talked about knowing your worth and also like not going below that. That's so important. A little hack I recently learned is Denver and Colorado have like salary disclosure laws. So you can like go look at roles in Denver, and that will at least give you an idea as to like what that role is in Denver, and then do some cost of living math to figure out, you know, like if you want just like a ballpark number, I like, you know, that's, there you go. Subscribe for more tips, hit the bell. Like
that's a great tip. Everyone should take that. I didn't even know that. So that it helps you kind of gauge, right? You know, if you live in Boulder and it's pretty expensive, then you can.
Can I just add one thing as
well?
Absolutely.
To this
concept of like salary? An error I see a lot of people making when they're transitioning in is they shoot for a really senior role. They're like, oh, I'm ready to, like, I've been in academia for 10 years, or, you know, I'm at a director level in like in a different industry for 10 years. So I'm going to roll in and apply to that lead product research role or that senior UXR role. No, honey. I'm really sorry. You need to start at the bottom, or kind of near the bottom, because there's a lot, like the first 6 months of my job at Pinterest, I basically just like I'd end every day by like leaning back in my chair and be like, oh my God, what have I done? Because there was so much to learn about working in tech and working in the product space. And it's not necessarily like put in your time, crotchety old man situation here, not at all, but it's also like the level of expectation I would have for a senior UXR to come in is pretty damn high. Right. And so if you've never worked cross-functionally, or you've never, you know, sort of made product recommendations or done product, or if your product sense is like still emerging, like you're not ready, and you will be set up to fail. And I would question a company that would bring someone in who is not prepared to do the job. So like, I know it sucks to hear like you have a doctorate and now you're expected to come in at like an associate level, like, yeah. But I will say that like often after a year, or, you know, a year and a half, 2 years, like you move up quite quickly but yeah, if you're quite senior somewhere else, like you are still going to need to take a bit of a shit sandwich and, you know, start near the bottom, because there's stuff that you don't know that you need to learn.
Yeah, that's important. And I hope that doesn't turn anyone away from the need that we have for UX researchers, especially with the background in empirical sciences. So it's just about learning product. We talk about product sense. Knowing how products are built is incredibly important to mesh with all of this. I mean, you're basically trying to do three things at the same time: learning product, learning UXR, and then taking what you've done in the past and trying to merge them. It takes just a bit of time, and a year is nothing. A year and a half is nothing, right? And you just start skyrocketing very quickly. And that's another way we're going to met more senior researchers very quickly, is all of the PhDs coming in, kind of, you know, putting in their time and then climbing up really fast for companies to utilize. Very good. How about you, Roshni?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I was reading the comments in the chat, and I think what's most important is to come armed with experience, but that experience doesn't necessarily need to be paid experience. If you take that initiative, you can early on to showcase that you have done your homework, you've learned, you can have that conversation on salary to say, hey, like this internship isn't my only like portfolio piece. I have years of experience in UX, and I want to really show you and highlight to you that I know my stuff to go for a certain band level, to go for a certain salary range, and this is why. I think you really need to be your best advocate when it comes to that, but also showing that you know how to add value to that organization. I think salary is a tricky topic and something that I also deal with early on in my career. I think it's like going from that shift of being the starving student to all of a sudden being like, know your worth. It's like, wait, what? Like, how do you have that conversation? But know that like your knowledge that you've built up over time means something. Understand the trends in the industry. Understand if you know the role, like show in that job description how you meet what you meet, and then where you've learned on your own to fill in the gaps or where you're aiming to learn. And then another piece is talk to friends in the industry. I think that's a really important one. Know your network and know like people at different levels, whether it's below you, above you, at your same level, to see if you're getting paid adequately. Women in tech and people of color are known to historically make less. And I don't think that's something that we should stand for or like continue on a trend with. Get allies, irrespective of their race, their gender, or anything, and just understand what everyone is making if they're comfortable sharing, and don't settle for less.
Don't settle for less. That's like a great key closer thing. Kali, you have your hands up. I think you have another comment. Oh, you're on mute.
I think yeah, sorry about that. I think she hit the head on the nail. It's no secret that there is a gender gap when it comes to pay. And I think, knowing your worth and like doing the real research to understand your worth, whether that's figuring out what the average researcher of your expertise makes, and adding about the cost of living, and also understanding just like what is going to have you living comfortably, especially if you're doing that transition over. You'll eventually live lavish. Eventually, the money will come in higher standards, but like first make sure that you're able to live comfortably and really build yourself. Like Marcos was saying, you're not going to always start off at that higher level. Like take your time and build yourself. Also, like every industry is different, so you're going to need time to adapt.
Absolutely. Thank you. We can talk about this AC Your Job interview subject forever, but I know Paul is looking at me crazy right now, so I know I need to give the mic back. It's been fantastic having you guys. We just hit, I think, a record number of participants today. We keep breaking it, and if you're coming back to these webinars in which we try to pack so much in so little time, we hope is valuable to you. We're going to keep making it valuable and building products as well that kind of enforces and helps more people cross into the field. I want to thank our guest speakers again, Marcos, Leah, Roshni. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. We are honored for you to share your knowledge with us. I'll turn it over to Paul. Thank you again, guys.